Good afternoon. I'm James Blue, and I am very glad to have this opportunity to continue the conversation related to Corruption Uncovered. We have a very, very talented panel, and I'll just introduce them as I give questions to them. Quentin Templeton was introduced during the last session. He is currently serving as an attorney for the ladies. And I guess, Quentin, I'd like to start with you because this seems like such a case of justice denied. And I just would like to understand, where are we, or where are you in the case, and what is the actual legal pursuit of justice?
Yeah, it's a great question. As you just heard from the video, the district court, the federal judge overseeing our case, dismissed it about a month after L.L.C killed himself, the day of jury selection in his criminal case. The entire argument was the statute of limitations, although he'd already ruled there wasn't a statute of limitations issue on the criminal side, nevertheless denied justice to these women based solely on that argument. So we have appealed it to the 10th Circuit. We have some briefs that are due, I think, in about a month right now, that we'll file that to the 10th Circuit, and then we'll await, after they get to respond and we reply, we'll await and see what the 10th Circuit does with it.
But isn't the 10th Circuit the court jurisdiction that is one of the most conservative in the country?
I don't think it's the most conservative.
Okay.
It has some conservative appointees, but I think if you really start looking at the opinions that the court's issuing, they're actually fairly tempered, fairly plaintiff-friendly in a lot of cases. I think there are far worse draws in terms of circuits that you might be trying to appeal to.
So what are the possibilities? What are you looking for?
Yeah, so we're just looking for reversal of the district court's order on the statute of limitations. And the argument's pretty simple. You guys all heard it. With them sitting up here, there was an immense amount of fear, and it doesn't take someone with a PhD to understand why. And that's pled into our complaint that we filed. We obviously knew that these actions occurred greater than 30 years ago in some cases. We obviously knew the state of the law today is that in Kansas there's a 2-year statute of limitations to bring a civil rights violation claim in the civil courts. So we pled that all of these women were too afraid to come forward, and that it wasn't until L.L.C was arrested that they were not afraid enough, or they felt safe enough that they were willing to come forward and tell their stories. And I think Michelle Houck's comments were pretty resonating on that front, that, you know, even when she's talking to people, she's still doing it with a silhouette because she's afraid. Nico Quinn being followed around, and all of that stuff is in the complaint. And our position is that the judge weighed that and said, well, we don't think that they were afraid enough. Or there wasn't a threat in the last 2 years from Roger L.L.C, and he was successful enough in being heinous enough 30 years ago that you're just out of a civil right. And really the natural results of that is it encourages police officers and government agents to be atrociously heinous, to make sure that they're bad enough and they scare you enough that you just wait out the 2 years if you're in Kansas. There are other states that have totally different statutes, which raises its own equal protection issue, that someone's civil rights is worth less in another state. Kansas less than other states. So that's the goal, is getting the 10th Circuit to say, no, 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 the district court judge doesn't get to guess or predict how afraid somebody is. That gets to go to a jury, and a bunch of Kansans get to decide that.
So Tricia Rojo Bushnell is the executive director of the Midwest Innocence Project, and she serves as a lead attorney there. And she's been involved in the efforts to find justice for the women of Kansas City for many years. I guess my question for you is, it's very clear that there were other actors involved. And so what are you doing? How are you trying to sort of sweep up and get others who potentially have committed crimes charged?
Yeah, I mean, before we even get to getting charged, it's even getting their actions reviewed or that their misconduct is even acknowledged. Because what we've seen time and time again is this argument that, oh, it's just Detective Golubski, right? He's this bad apple, but there's no way he could have done all of this on his own. And in fact, when we were litigating Lamont McIntyre's case, at that time, Golubski's former partner, Terry Ziegler, was the chief of police, right, who later then had to resign. But it gets worse, because even now, when we continue to say, we come out and talk to the public and say, what do you think justice should look like? How do we want to make sure justice is supported in our community? This isn't something that just happened 30 years ago. Are these the kinds of officers you want in your child's school, right? Are these the kinds of officers you want pulling your loved one over? The response we get is, well, that was a long time ago. And the officials that we hear that from are, for example, our current mayor, Tyrone Garner, who used to be the head of internal affairs in the police department. And I currently represent a woman who reported the sexual misconduct that Golubski had done, and just like Lamont McIntyre, her son was taken away and is wrongfully incarcerated right now. So we go out and we hear from everyone it's forever ago, but the reality is it isn't. So what can we do right now? We've asked the Department of Justice to do something. That has obviously, one, never happened, but two, won't happen now under the current administration. We went to original actors like conviction integrity units, that one that was started, but what we've seen time and time again is we present a case and we say we're ready to go, and they don't want to take it, including we just had 2 clients who were exonerated in December, Cedric Warren and Dominic Moore, that office fought us the entire way until we had to win in front of the court, right? So then we have a mayor who doesn't want to do anything. But that doesn't mean there's nothing that can happen. The state of Kansas could decide it wants to investigate this, right? The legislature could say, you know what, we actually think that everyone in Wyandotte County matters, and we should care what those police officers in Wyandotte County do, because they're going to wander over to the rest of the part of the state, right? And they could do things like passing unique identifiers for police officers, making sure they can't wander everywhere, opening up disciplinary records, opening up just open records in general. But as a significant factor, what we are asking for them to do right now is just have an investigation. Please just, someone as an independent review, the state needs to say, we need an independent actor to go into this police department, see what happened, see why it's allowed to continue to happen, and make corrections, make a report, bring it out to light.
I want to come next to Rich Rivera. Rich is a police officer with over 25 years experience in law enforcement, and he's dedicated himself to investigating and addressing issues of corruption within police departments. Rich, when you hear this story, when you hear sort of these tales of justice denied, and as an officer, active police officer, chief of police, what's your response? Like, what and how and why does this happen?
The how and why is because they can. It's as simple as that. And if nobody's going to hold them accountable, it'll continue. This is a great case study if you look at it. But more importantly, it's about destroyed lives, destroyed families, destroyed communities. And when that story resonates, and as a community, we could collectively look at that and then peel off the layers and understand how did we get here, then we'll understand how to fix it. And that's what I've been working on for the last 3 decades, is rooting out corruption, misconduct, exposing it, trying to come up with better ways to hold police officers accountable.
And as you hear the tales of Golubski and his partners and the former head of internal affairs, there's been no consequence for any of their actions. How can a community trust their public servants if these are the ways in which they act?
I'm a firm believer in civilian oversight. It's part of our jobs as the community to oversee police departments. It's our job to hold them accountable. It's our jobs to set what the standards are. Policing in America is consensual by our society. They don't dictate the terms on how they're going to police us. They don't dictate the technologies that they're going to use against us. It's having a handle on what's taking place and understanding how all of these technologies, all of these policies that are in place, how everything operates, and then reverse engineer it so that as a society we better understand how these mechanisms are being used, how we could hold those officers and their police chiefs accountable, and to talk about it in open forums like this, because that's when you're going to bring the transparency. And I'm a firm believer in transparency in policing.
So Barry Scheck is a renowned civil rights lawyer and co-founder of the Innocence Project. He's helped exonerate hundreds of wrongfully convicted individuals. Barry, I think this case raises so many issues, but probably the largest is the lack of transparency and the lack of records in terms of what individual police officers were alleged to have done. How, if you look beyond Kansas, how are things changing? What are the possibilities? And I know there's effort in California that you think deserves mention.
Yes, I should note that the law firm that Peter Neufeld and I founded, and actually I participated, Neufeld, Scheck, Rustin, Freudenberger, and Hoffman, actually represented Lamar and deposed all the police officers. So let's just be clear, if there had been any kind of transparency.
Barry, can you just hold your mic a bit closer to your mouth? Hold your mic closer to your mouth.
Oh, if there had been any kind of transparency, this would have been discovered because everybody knew. Everybody knew.
It's an open secret.
Secret.
There's no such thing as secrets in police departments. They all know each other's business.
Well, but they saw what he was doing right there. So there is something that's going on now in California. There was a George Floyd moment, remember that? And legislation was passed in the state of California, which had the worst misconduct statute in the country, right? Because of the strength of the police unions. But this statute says, number one, every police officer and every correction officer must get a license. Number two, there are 9 serious acts of misconduct that apply to everyone. That's fair to the police and correction officers. And if you commit one of those 9 serious acts of misconduct, you can be decertified. Number 3, and it's the only state that has it, and a lot of us that try to deal with using artificial intelligence tools in consistent with social and democratic values, which is how it should be done, every correction officer and every police officer in the state of California has a unique identifier. So you can track them wherever they go, and you can really begin to data mine the information. The other thing that has come about is there's something that we call the Community Law Enforcement Accountability Network. 40 California newsrooms. That doesn't happen very often. The ACLU, the public defenders, the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, impacted community groups, all got this statute passed, and some prosecutors as well supported this. We have collected now, using Public Record Act requests, all the adjudicated acts of misconduct that we can get from all 58 counties in the state of California. And sometime before July, we're going to roll out a public-facing database so people can actually get into a portal and find officers who have committed acts of misconduct, go to find different kinds of acts of misconduct, and that kind of transparency, the public-facing database, is going to, in turn, engender crowdsourcing, people coming forward, giving out more information in what we call a federated space. And the bottom line, James, you know as somebody involved in media, the truth is the only way we are going to get accountability of law enforcement in this country is for civil society to have oversight and do it. You can't ask the police departments.
Police can't police themselves.
They cannot police themselves. So if you have public-facing databases, the federated space where information gets shared, you will be able to, and these standards, right? 9 serious acts of misconduct that can get you decertified, and they get licenses, just the way lawyers and doctors and plumbers and people that do work where the lives of people are at stake, that kind of professionalism is what we need.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting and hopeful development. I guess, Tricia and Quentin, would that type of tool, how would that type of tool have impacted your clients?
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of the problem with our case, or not with our case, but with the facts, is that they, because it's not just Golubski, I think the U.S. Marshal of Kansas was mentioned up on the stage. They've been running loose, doing whatever they want to these people for decades. And Golubski wasn't the first officer in KCK to rape somebody. And that sort of mineable data where you can point out there are outliers and anomalies and some things happening in Y code that we need to address is critical. And part of the problem we've had in KCK is the state of internal affairs. And we have report after report after report of people going to internal affairs and the response being, well, our officers don't do that. And then there's no report. And I don't have Golubski's internal affairs. Did you guys get that in McIntyre? Is there anything there? I mean, I would guess there's nothing there. And I don't have it because our case got dismissed at the motion to dismiss stage. But if we get back, we're going to ask for that. And my guess is people that we know reported things about Golubski aren't in there. And so having something like that is, from our plaintiff's perspective, obviously the things that happened to them already happened. But having them, if we had that 30 years ago, it might have stopped his ability to rampage like he did as long as he did.
Yeah, Tricia, there just isn't a culture of accountability, and the lack of accountability allows officers to just run roughshod over the citizens they're supposed to police.
It's not only a lack of accountability, it's also a vilification of victims. You know, as we've heard all throughout the day, when we don't have this transparency, it's very easy for an officer to say, you're going to believe them? That's the person I pulled over. That's the person I arrested. That's someone that, you know, that's an addict. That's this, like all these names. And a lot of the women, in addition to the women that you heard on stage, there were a lot of other women that were sex workers or were used as informants, right, by Golubski, and were in these very vulnerable positions where they would never be believed. And so when we have these open records and access to it, it creates the support so that someone can't say it's he said, she said of a police officer versus a citizen when you should be equally valuing someone's voice, but we don't. And the sad fact is, what ends up happening is, you know, my office, we do have an internal database, right? We've been working on these cases for years now. It feels like almost a decade. And so we have not only what we've had access to through cases, but we go on and look at what civil lawsuits were filed against these officers previously. And there are a lot of them. And so having them in the place where public could know about it is really important because it supports everything that everyone's been saying and makes it, you know, gives them the strength to know there's hands at their back when they come forward and say something happened.
Rich, are police departments and police officers fearful of transparency? Do they feel it is going to somehow constrain their ability to do their jobs?
They do, and that's a misconception. Because if they're doing the right job and they're doing everything they're supposed to, they shouldn't have to fear any of that. And those are the ones that I would go to bat for 1,000% of the time. I have colleagues here in the room who are whistleblowers, who understand what it's like to come forward and report corruption within the police department. So that's a misnomer, and that's because it's cultural within a police department. When one says it, all of a sudden it becomes gospel, and they all believe in it, when nothing could be further from the truth. We ran, back in 2018, we did a statewide analysis on NJ.com, something like 70,000 use of force reports was entered into that database. And you could pinpoint which officers had the highest frequency of use of force, what agencies they work for. And it wasn't a surprise that a lot of them took down their Facebook profiles within the same week.
Yeah, because people learned that they were doing and using their weapons more frequently than others. Before we go, Barry, can you help us understand this development in California? Tricia referred to it. The federal system does not seem to be a place that wants to hear any of these arguments. Why are the states so important at this point?
Well, when we sued, as Tricia mentioned, we had discussions with the Department of Justice, right? Many of the people that you saw on that stage, right, their testimony could and would, and actually to some extent did, get through to the federal prosecutors. And the Department of Justice has an authority, they call it a 14141 consent decree. And they have gone into a number of police departments and tried to change behavior. Now, the person that runs that had a discussion with him about this particular case, and he said, well, you know, first we'll indict L.L.C, and then we'll get to this. And it was interesting because he literally said to me, you know, how many places can we bring these consent decrees? We'd have so many of these departments. So the solution is the states, because that is the only place where we're really going to get action, because these are the communities where people live. If the good officers, as my friend Johnny Cochran always used to say, are afraid of the bad ones, right, then you don't have public safety. The L.L.C case is a perfect example because he was doing deals with all the drug dealers, right, as well as sexually assaulting all these women. Now, what kind of a community is that?
And just last week, the DOJ dropped all of those consent decrees. Cities like Trenton and Phoenix, Minneapolis, they've gotten out from being under the gauntlet. And now it's up to those communities to decide what police reform and police accountability looks like.
And the states are the best place to do it.
Tricia and Quentin, do you believe that there is potential relief at the state level?
I do. So, you know, in our organization, we work with the Kansas legislature on lots of different reforms, and they have been open to it. They've passed things like eyewitness identification reform, or, you know, the use of recording of interrogations, compensation for the wrongfully convicted. They care about these issues, but it's very easy for people to pass the buck, right? So until we also get people from other counties to call their legislatures and say, I care that that cop probably is going to come over here, right? L.L.C didn't end his service in Wyandotte County, right? He went to Edwardsville, and that's where he retired. And so those folks should care. Until we get everybody else to hear about it, it's going to be a harder thing for them to say they want to look at.
Yeah. My last question is for Quentin, and you can certainly answer the question I put to Tricia, but it's also, this case seems so fraught. It's happened for so many years. And I don't want to suggest that it's hopeless, but it just seems like there isn't a lot of light there. And I just want to understand what keeps you going. But do you think there's hope at the state level? And what does keep you going?
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, obviously, Tricia and her group and everything they've been able to achieve in Kansas, the exoneration compensation statute is incredible and one of the most robust in the country. I mean, as red as Kansas is right now, versus how purple it was several years ago, I think there is a lot of hope. And they're not bad people in the legislature. They want to do the right thing. And I think our ability to, you know, model off of California and be able to say, it doesn't make sense that the legislature requires a plumber to get licensed, but we allow people to run around with guns all day long and we don't register them at all. And that allows them to jump from KCK over to Edwardsville, and we see that pathway through a lot of them. So I do think there's hope at the state level. And I think, sort of your last question about what keeps me going, I mean, we've got an appeal to win. So we've got to keep marching along, and we've got to keep figuring out ways that in plain language we can explain to people what you guys heard today on the stage with those 5 women, or 4 women.
Yeah, and I guess one thing that I did not do, and I apologize, and I just really would like to get your very quick response to this. These are African American women. If they were white women, would they be in the, I mean, just break it down. And that's something that just doesn't really get spoken about often.
Yeah, I'll take a crack at it. Yeah, I mean, we talk about that. Sandra, for example, very often, I have 2 young girls, and she tries to liken her experience and people she knows experiences to me, and what would you do if this happened to your girls? And the comment I've settled on is, it would never happen to my girls. That wouldn't ever happen. No one would ever do that to them. And then I follow it with, but I'd burn the place to the ground, which is the truth. It wouldn't have happened, I think Nico said it, if it were a black cop doing it to white women. And it wouldn't happen if it happened in Johnson County, Kansas, the very, very white suburb of Kansas City that has a lot of money. There's a reason it was Roger Golubski. There's a reason he's white. There's a reason it happened in KCK.
Great.
I mean, I would also add, I thought about this a lot when we saw the federal hearings about Larry Nassar with the gymnastics, right? Where he was abusing all of these gymnasts. And I just kept thinking, when do the women in Kansas City, Kansas get to have this moment? When do they get to have the entire country hear them and believe them and support them?
All right, well, thank you. Good luck with the work that you're doing. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for attending. Thank you very much.
Thank you.